everyone. Welcome to the academic night for the fourth semester. So first of all, congratulations to making it till now. You passed preclinical dentistry, so huge step in your academic life here in dentistry is done. It's gonna, let's say, not get easier, but also not harder. It's staying at the same level kind of now. But yeah, so this summer they're gonna have like a number of exams, and we'll try our best to prepare you for them a little bit. Okay, first of all, contents. We're gonna speak a little bit about the exams, give you an overview of what you have. We're gonna then talk about each subject, and in the end, remind you about a few things that can help you to pass those exams. Okay, so fourth semester exams and credit test. You have quite a lot on your plate this semester, especially if you still have, like, for example, histology and anatomy to do. But don't panic, it's totally manageable if you just do your scheduling of the exam period right. Your physiology, biochemistry, preventive dentistry, oral health and dentistry, oral histology and embryology, and check exams. It seems like a lot, but if you think about it, it's only physiology, biochem, and preventive, which are kind of big exams. The rest is like, one of those 1 week studying exams. I mean, check you all know by now. Public health you will do during the semester. Oral histology is like really small exam, so you don't have to worry about it. So really study hard for the first 3 ones, and the rest, like I have faith in you that this will be no problem for you. Like always, you also have a few credit tests. I guess if the pandemic situation allows them, or if nothing has changed, definitely in preventive dentistry, you'll have a credit test, and like on top of that, the exam. The credit test is kind of structured in karyology and periodontology, but I'll tell more about this later. Then, like usual, the biochemistry check credit tests, physiology, you'll have the one in the IS, and microbiology, and the practice course ends in a credit test too. So, like I said, you have a lot on your plate, especially if you still have to do histo. Don't panic, just really do your scheduling right. Of course, we always recommend to pass everything, so you have easier going next semester with your exams. But your priorities are now physiology and preventive dentistry, because those are prerequisites for a lot of things next semester. You're kind of lucky in this way. Like for us, biochemistry was also still prerequisite for a lot of things. So you had to pass this first try in this summer too. But they changed this apparently now. That's only prerequisite for some 6th semester course. So you can leave biochemistry for winter if you want. But of course, it's always better to get it out of the way. And there are a few more reasons why it's good to do biochemistry, like especially before physiology. But we'll come to this later. Okay, now the different subjects. First of all, I want to say, like, if you have any questions, just write it in the chat and we'll come to it at the end. Also, after each subject, I will ask you if you have any questions, and like we can make the things a little bit more organized this way. All right, physiology. So seems like a lot, but it's really not that hard of an exam. First of all, the credit test is the same like last semester. You have this credit test on the IS in the end of the semester. Where I think have a week or so to pass it, and if you fail it, then you'll have another week to pass the resit or something like this. It's basically the same structure, everything like in Physiology 1, just with the additional topics. We recommend always to like meet up and do it together. It's maybe a bit hard in the pandemic times, but maybe you can all kind of agree on a time and do a Teams or something like this, or just meet up and have 1.5 meters distance and masks while doing it. And then you can really together go over all the questions. Like we did it something like one guy is taking the exam, one guy is Googling the answers, the other guy has a textbook. I mean, I'm sure you know it from last semester. Also, hopefully by end of the semester, when you have the credit test, you already started studying for the exam at least a little bit, so you have some overview over all the topics. But yeah, what's really counting is the final exam. So we're not really sure how it's going to be for you. I have both options displayed here. The old options, which is also still written in your catalog. If you look in the IS for your course, it still shows this old option, which is like highlighted here. However, I had a physiology exam last semester, 2 semesters ago, which was also already pandemic situation. And there they changed the rules a little bit. So kind of be ready for both varieties, or ask your professors, then maybe we'll be able to tell you which one it will be. The old form was a written multiple choice test, which is 20 questions, and you need at least 15 to pass. This is not a problem. It's like in all those kinds of exams, the written is usually a little bit more detailed. It's a little bit about certain values you have to memorize and stuff like this. And it's not that hard, but it requires a little bit more memorizing, while the oral exam requires a little bit more understanding the processes and being able to explain. Then you have a practical examination, which is basically everything you have done in your practical courses. Don't worry, like I'll explain a little bit more later. You don't have to like perform the whole experiments, especially now during the pandemic time. They try to keep it as theoretical as possible. And then the oral exam where you have 2 questions and 15 minutes preparation time. Okay, and this is the one option, and how it was 2 semesters ago, and might be the same again if the pandemic doesn't change, is that you only have an oral exam. So the written part is skipped, and you have 4 questions in total. One will be again about the practice, but it will be purely theoretical. So you have to just explain how the experiment works, how all the principles behind it, the physiological values you can expect, and what would be pathological values, and so on. And then you have 3 theoretical questions from the question list, like always. That there's one extra instead of the written multiple choice test. Also in this case, you wouldn't have any preparation time, but I didn't mind this at all, actually. Like, I had this type of exam and it was really, really nice and chilled. Like, they really have tried to have kind of a discussion with you. Of course, it mainly involves about the question you pick, but they ask you a lot of questions and try to help you a lot. So really don't panic that you don't have the preparation time. I know I always like to prepare. I like to write everything down, and it made me a bit uneasy that I wouldn't have this preparation time, but in the end, it worked out pretty well. Yeah, so one tip I want to give you, even though biochemistry is not prerequisite for anything next semester for you guys, if you have the time and you think you can manage, try to do biochemistry before physiology, because literally 1/3 of what physiology is biochemistry. If you already passed the biochemistry exam and you know your biochemistry well, you're gonna have a much easier time in physiology. Like, a lot of things, a lot of knowledge is overlapping there. All right. Yeah, so in physiology, it's really important to understand the different processes in the body and how they connect. It's not a subject where only memorizing will really bring you far, not like in anatomy, for example. I heard a lot of people actually have problems with this who so far made it through school really good with just memorizing all the lectures, memorizing everything. Of course, you still need to memorize a lot of values and things here, but they really want you to understand, like, if you have tachycardia, what can be the cause, what can be the result, what happens in the rest of the body, and so on. Like, you really need to understand the whole processes. So try to have different sources to study for this, not only one source. So you have different views on the things, and can really get into the topic. Important note I want to say about the exam too is if you pick a question, apparently this has happened to a few dentistry students. If you pick a question or they generate questions for you on the computer and you don't recognize this question, don't panic and think, oh, I forgot to study this one. It could be that they just forgot that you're a dentistry student. So make sure to remind them, oh, is this question really for dentistry? And maybe it was actually for general medicine. They have a few more questions than us. Yeah, about the practical part, don't worry if you, wouldn't know how to really perform this procedure like in practice, especially now in the pandemic, but even in normal situations, it's mainly theoretical. Like, if you know all the principles behind it, if you know how it theoretically works and can explain it, and of course a little bit the parts of the instruments or machines or whatever that are used, if you can theoretically explain them, you're gonna be fine. Like, it's not too hard about this. To study for this, I would say just use the protocols. That's all I use, and you can try to find YouTube videos for each of the procedures, and really try to visualize it. It's always better to visualize stuff, especially if it's practical related, and then you can just explain how it's performed. Here it says also paper and pen for drawing. You should really use ShadTag with you if you have to like draw some graphs or something. But I mean, you always go into exam with paper and pen. I assume that shouldn't be a problem. I really recommend Costanzo Physiology and Guyton and Hall textbook. Those are really good books. I mainly used Costanzo, to be honest. The way I studied, I first read basically through the whole Costanzo just to get really understanding of all the topics, because I think they explain it really well. Like, just to read through the whole book once will maybe not be sufficient to pass the exam, but at least you have a good understanding about each different subject. And then I used mainly documents. They're really good. You find the final exam section A and B document in the DenSoc Study Hub. And also Diana's document is really good. If you basically use those three sources, that's how I studied for physiology, and it was really more than enough. Also, you can, of course, always look at YouTube channel. We put a little link here, one of our students shared, which really helped this and about cardiology and also other stuff. And yeah, basically, don't panic about physiology. Sorry? Okay, so thought someone said something. Like physiology, they're really fair with dentistry students. Like, as long as you understand the basics, you should be really fine, actually. And of course, you should always know the physiological values for everything, but that's kind of self-explanatory. Okay, so the next subject will be biochemistry.
But first, if you guys have any questions about physiology in particular, you can ask now.
So you just revised basically the practicals by rereading your protocols, or because for a few of them we haven't had them in person. I don't know if you also had that.
Yeah, protocols, and I guess you have the book practicals in physiology, or what it's called, the white book. And there each experiment procedure is basically explained. Like, I didn't use the protocols too much, like a little bit as an overview, but mainly I used the white book. And then also you can just type in each of the procedures, experiments, whatever. You can type in YouTube and find explanation about this. And yeah, always try to understand the theory behind the thing. That's the most important part. Like, if you can explain all this, they will, like, close an eye if you maybe forget one part of the practical procedure or something. But yeah, basically the white book is main source to study for the practical lessons, for the practical part, I would say.
Okay, thank you.
No worries. Any other questions?
So if you guys do have the online version, they specified that the practical part of the examination would only be maximum 5 minutes. So that's really not a lot of time. So again, just knowing like particular terms, principles, clinical uses of, the clinical uses of the methods, and that's the main part of that.
Yeah.
Practical. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, for example, when I had my practical part, it sounds not a lot, like 5 minutes, and it was literally, I think, only 5 minutes. And I just started to explain the thing, and then she was, already seeing that I know how it works, and then she already didn't want me to continue explaining, and then just ask like specific questions. So it's really like short and to the point. So yeah, don't worry, just know the basics, and you'll be fine. Okay, then. If no more questions, I think we can continue with biochemistry.
Okay, so for biochemistry, you will be having the same credit test as you did last semester. I think, yes, biochemistry was last semester. So your final exam will be oral. There are 3 questions, one from each section. You won't have time for preparation, but again, even this department, they do really look for your understanding of the process and how the whole body is involved in it, which parts are involved in it. So I know a lot of you are planning on doing the biochemistry exam in the winter, so that's okay, because I don't think it's prerequisite, but like Moritz said, it does help you with physiology. But if that's not your plan, then it's okay. But again, yes, mainly just understand the basics, and on the next slide, we'll have more information. So in this exam, of course, you'll have to draw some things. They love drawings, whether it's compounds or cycles. And so take a pen, or always be prepared, even online, and they can ask you for this. Another thing is clinical values, which are listed in the exam list questions. Right at the top there, there's a list of values that you should know. So know those by heart. And again, just it's very deeply connected to Biochemistry 1. So just if you have a good base in Biochem 1, they won't ask you too much about that, and maybe they'll just stick to the more Biochemistry 2 related things. But just make sure you have good knowledge of Biochemistry 1 as well, because it does overlap and they ask a lot as well. Now, the lectures, of course, they have all the information you need. They have good information. Seminars are really important because they have the questions that they usually ask in exams, things that they think are important, and your protocols, of course. Now, these are some YouTube videos you can watch, AK Lectures, Dr. G, but even for anatomy, if some of you still have anatomy left, I would recommend that you find some other videos if you do not have time for Dr. Najib, because his videos are quite long. So I can actually give you some of those YouTube channels for anatomy and later, but for biochemistry, again, you can use those. And there are documents on the Google Drive that you can use, which will be more than enough. So again, they really do care mainly about the understanding of the processes, how everything is connected, and your bases should be covered with Biochem 1.
Yeah, so any questions about that? Thank you. Then I would like to add also one thing. One of the differences in studying for physiology and biochemistry, at least for me, was that for physiology, I didn't use the lectures at all. Like, you can look at them. Yeah, one thing I also wanted to add about physiology, the lectures are not really good to study from, at least I found that, but have a look at them, because some of the values, physiological values and other values that are mentioned in the lectures are sometimes a little bit different from what's said in the books or documents, just so you know the actual values they want to hear. If you're sometimes uncertain, check in the lectures. But generally, biochemistry lectures are perfect for studying, at least in my case. Like, the biochemistry department is really well organized, I think. And if you just use the lectures, the seminar texts, and your protocols, and maybe, try to follow along with the protocol, with the weekly practice a little bit and prepare for it, I think you're gonna be with those sources. And then, yeah, of course, videos are always nice as an addition of some documents.
Yeah, Arden?
Yeah, the question here for me, you say the biochemistry is going to be the credit test is going to be like the same as the last semester, but last semester we didn't have any credit tests for biochem, or we didn't have anything for biochemistry.
Okay,
but
then
I want to know how is it like.
Then maybe ask your professor. Do you also have not the progress test anymore this semester? Do you know already something about this?
I don't think so. That
we do, but it's online. Only 3 progress tests, but online on Robot.
Okay. So yeah, if you didn't have it last semester, I can explain. If it's still the same system, for us it was like you have the progress tests, and if you pass all the progress tests, you don't have to do the credit test. But if you don't, or you need, I think, a certain amount of points. It was like this. So you need a certain amount of points from the progress tests, and then you don't have to do the credit test. But in our class, for example, everyone ended up always to everyone had to do the credit test in the end. But the credit test is really simple. It's mainly, or actually completely, information that comes from the seminars. And the pass mark is only 45%, so it's really simple. And like, I think no one really usually fails the credit tests. And if you do, you even have two resets. So don't worry about this. But maybe ask your professors how it will be. Like maybe the system slightly changed, especially if you only have 3 progress tests. But that's how it was like before pandemic times.
Yes, Sanaz?
I just wanted to mention that it should be similar to the medical chemistry we had, so I think it shouldn't be hard.
Yeah, it's the same system exactly like medical chemistry. It's exactly the same structure.
I would also just like to add a personal recommendation for physiology. So, like Moritz said, it's better if you use Costanzo because I actually have the guidance textbook here and it's this thick. So, if you do not want to go through something this massive, obviously we do not have time for that. The section A and section B documents actually have the information copy pasted from Gaiden, so it's better if you just use those rather than borrowing that beast. Okay, we can continue.
But also, if you don't want to borrow it, I think all the physiology textbooks are, I think for sure in the MIMSA study hub and also in the DANSOC study hub. So you'll find the Costanzo. Then there's also a board review or something like this, Costanzo. It's like a more like short version and a little bit more summarized version. So if you like to study from books, use those. But if not, if you use all the documents, I think you'll have enough information too. Okay, so any more questions or can we continue to the next one? All right, then let's go to preventive dentistry, your basically first clinical subject of your studies. Yeah, preventive dentistry, you'll have lectures and you have to practice weekly if it didn't change with the pandemic. And it ends in a credit test and also in an exam. The credit test, like the lectures too, are structured into karyology and also into periodontology. If it usually was like this, that karyology was taught by Professor Kuklitova and periodontology by Professor Poshkarova. I think nothing probably changed in this way. Short mentioning how the credit test used to be, just in case all of a sudden the pandemic is over and you have the normal situation for exam period. It used to be for periodontology 30 questions, both multiple choice and open answers, and mainly knowledge from the lectures and practicals. And karyology was 3 parts. First, you have to write down tooth notations like you did in preclinical. Shouldn't be anything new. And there were absolutely no mistakes allowed, because by now this you should really know. Like if you make a mistake there, you have to reset it. So really try to practice those notations. You can even do it in the practicals. The teachers there will help you if you ask, and sometimes if you have still time at the end of a practical class, they can go over it with you if you want. Same goes for X-rays, by the way. If you have some spare time in the practical lessons, ask the teachers if you can go over X-rays. Like in every spare minute, just go over X-rays. It helps you a lot for later exams too. And of course, part 2 question is like a question about a topic from the lectures and practicals, usually something you did in the practicals, like preventive fillings, fissure sealing, classification of caries, etc. Like really basic knowledge, let's say, if you compare to what you need to for the exam. But last year it was slightly different because of pandemic situation. Or maybe they just changed it generally, I don't know. Periodontology is only 60 questions. They're all open-ended, and you get 70 marks for. Umama, you had it right, like this.
Yeah, I can explain.
What do you mean
one.
with 70 marks? Yeah.
So basically, there were Professor Poskarova. She sent over. She told us a time. We had just 1 hour. She sent us a document by email. It had 16 questions, a bunch of sub questions. They were all open ended, and in total there were 70 marks accounted for in that test, and then we had to send it back. But here, if she does something like this again, where you have to email her your answers, make sure that you remind her that it could potentially be in her spam folder, because a lot of the emails go to her spam folder. So she can think that you failed just because you didn't send it, but make sure that you do and make sure that you clarify. And for Karyology, we just had a few assignments just because everything was quite rushed and new, and so with the online system, and so we had a few assignments. They gave us different X-ray images. We just had to calculate DMFT, DMFS, and then send it back to them by email.
Yeah, thank you. And DMFT, DMFS, if you haven't heard about it yet, you will doing this practice and this course, and you will have plenty of opportunity to practice this. I think you will practice this like at least once per practical lesson over the next few weeks. And so don't worry about this. It's really not that bad. Okay, but let's go to the final exam, which is a little bit more tricky than the credit test, but also doable. If you study for it. You need to have, first of all, like always, you need to have passed the credit test before. If it's in person and you failed the credit test, then you might be able to do the credit test right before you do your final exam. Like just reset the credit test, they correct it on the spot, and then you can do the final exam. But if it's not in person, then this is probably slightly different. So always ask your professor. It's purely oral exam. You will get 3 questions. In the pandemic, I assume that you probably don't have preparation time. You will do it over MS Teams and have to start talking immediately. But just in case you have an in-person class, I would just want to tell you that you have preparation time, and especially Kukletova would like you to use this time, and like in preclinical, to write everything down you can, and make sure you write neatly, you use clear language, you use bullet points and not full sentences. Sometimes she even mentions this herself in the exam, like she doesn't like if you write her a novel. She really wants bullet points and the important things. And yeah, so try to do this if it's an in-person exam, and if not, then don't panic, then it will be more of a discussion anyways than a exam. Yeah, usually 2 questions you will discuss with Professor Kukletova and 1 periodontology question with Professor Poshkarova. If it's not in person, I'm not exactly sure. It probably won't be like this. Probably it will be only 1 professor examining you. But if it's in person, it will be the 2 of them, and they will split the questions among them. Okay, here I really want to recommend you. If you only mention 1 type of lectures this semester, do preventive dentistry. It's really important to listen to what Kukletova says in the lectures, because she will want really specific information. Like about certain topics, you can talk to her for 10 minutes or write a whole page in your preparation, and she will say what is this? You don't even mention what I wanted to hear. She really wants to hear specific things. So really make sure in lectures, or if you get commented lectures from her, make sure you listen to the comments and listen to what she says about those topics and what is important to her. Generally, everything with fluoride, know it by heart. She loves fluoride questions. Know all the values of in drinking water, the different values. Basically, everything with fluoride you have to know. Also, the de- and remineralization processes are Professor Kukletova's favorites. So I experienced that even if you get totally unrelated questions to fluoride, Professor Kukletova sometimes manages to somehow bring it back to fluoride and ask you everything about it. So really know fluoride by heart. It's her favorite topic ever. Yeah, and generally use all the lectures to study. Also, they will give out printed lectures. Make sure not to forget about them till the end of the semester, and then you have to look for them everywhere, keep them in a handy place, don't throw them away or something, because those printed out lectures, they also contain some very specific information that they will want to hear in the exam. And I've made this experience. I got some information about a question somewhere from some online source or something like this, and it ended out to be maybe also not wrong, but it was not what Professor Kukletova wanted to hear about this subject. So you need to use her information, her lectures. And of course, if some of the questions they don't give you much information about, then you can still use other sources. But really always have the source of her lectures on the side and then use other sources to complete this. We really recommend you the DENSOC Preclinical Survival Guide. There you have a list of important topics that they like to like you to always remember, not only in like in the exam, but in general in lectures and practicals. They can ask you about stuff like this. Yeah, and like I said, use the lectures, and we also DenSoc made a document. Some students, we wrote down for each question, we wrote down the answers as good as we could from all information possible, and we had it verified by the professors. So you can use this document. Just notice that it don't only use the document. We don't give you a guarantee that you pass if you use this document, but it's a really good summary of all the questions and everything together. So you can find this document like always in the study hub. You can use it as like to structure your studying for this exam, but also use different sources. Especially for periodontology part, you need to know much more information than what is in the lectures, because the lectures are mainly pictures from Professor Pashkova. She doesn't give you like all the information in the lectures. There you need to use our document, for example. You need to use different books and videos. She really wants to know your details there. Like if she talks about periodontology, she wants you to know like even it goes into oral immunology, about microbiology as well, which bacteria you can find in the mouth, the different immunological processes that go on in the mouth. She really wants to know your detail there. So use the lectures as a structure, use our document, and also YouTube has some really good videos on oral immunology. It's called Hack Dentistry. You can check them out, and here I mentioned some books which are good to study for this, so you can check those out too. And yeah, that's about preventive dentistry. That's also an exam I would recommend to get out of the way as soon as possible before you, because it's still a lot to study for, but not as much, I would say, as for biochemistry or physiology, for example. But it's a really important exam. It's prerequisite for next semester, and like it's like everything dentistry related. You should do good performance there, and please Professor Kuklitova as much as possible. So yeah, try to get this out of the way early, I recommend. Okay, do you have any questions about preventive dentistry?
Okay, so just a few recommendations. Of course, you just had your preclinical exam, so that's good, but the knowledge from there is really important because they do go into details about x-rays, where you place the x-ray holder, and really tiny details that you wouldn't expect, but they can honestly ask you anything that you know, anything that you've learned about dentistry up until now. So that's important. They can also ask you histology questions and developmental, some embryology questions as well in relation to the diet that you would recommend for your patients. So all your preclinical knowledge is very important, and particularly for periodontology. She has particular questions that she really loves about CPITN. So just be very familiar with all the indices. Make sure you know each extraordinary case, because sometimes there could be a pocket but no bleeding, so the CPITN value would be different. So like that, she loves to ask those kind of questions. So yeah.
Yeah. Another thing I also want to mention, not sure if that's still the case, but for us it was like this. One something you have to do for the credit is also to have your score in the papilla bleeding index below 15. I'm not sure if you have done it yet in practicals, but you will definitely do it, and you will do it multiple times. You will always, in turns of your classmates, you will take your PBIs, your papilla bleeding indexes, and it has to be in the last lesson under 15, otherwise you're not getting the credit. So if you have done it already or will do it soon, and you have like a crazy high score, don't worry. Like it seems scary first, but if you really just brush a little bit more properly and use floss really every day, then it's like within 2 weeks you can get it down to 5 or something like this. It's really easy to have your papilla bleeding index a little bit lower. And at the same time, you might learn a thing or two about oral hygiene that you maybe didn't know yet. So don't panic about this. It's really more of a like gag, I guess they do, that they say you have to get like have proper oral hygiene and able to pass this course. But I mean, it's fair enough, right? We're dentists, so we should do the same methods that we recommend to our patients.
Yeah, you can also use chlorhexidine mouthwash, because that's what I did to get my score down quickly.
Yeah, you can exactly trick around a little bit and should be fine. Okay, if there aren't any more questions. Then we'll go to the next one, public health and dentistry. So this is not a big exam, but some people really struggle with it. So I'll tell you everything about it again. You can have the exam already during the semester, so don't worry about it messing up your exam period schedule. It's a written part only. You will have 20 multiple choice questions. You need 14 to pass, and there will be negative marking. So if you remember from biology, it's a pain in the ass. You'll get 0.5 minus 0.5 mark for every wrong answer you do. So like in biology, again, just it's sometimes better to leave it blank than to like answer a wrong one. So be 100% sure about your answers. In the lectures, at least it was the case with our professor. I think by now you have a different professor, but he was always talking about specific slides he used, that they are very important, and then you can be sure that they 100% come up in the final credit test. Same goes with specific pages in this book, which is called Basic Epidemiology. They will tell you basically which pages are very important to study from. And then again, you can be really sure that at least something of those pages which have been mentioned come up in the test. Basically, all the study material I used is this book, which I mentioned down here in the presentation, Basic Epidemiology. It's 200 pages, so just try to read once it through, and then use the pages that were recommended by the professor really in detail and try to memorize this. And you should be fine, I think. Yeah, if you don't pass, you like always have to reset, so don't get too stressed about this. You also have 2 bonus points if you attend all the lectures. I'm not sure if this is still applicable during the pandemic with online lectures and all, but if he takes attendance and like told you about this, then it might be that you get the bonus points. Like he didn't tell us about it. He just said like you should come to all the lectures, and he took attendance, but it was never officially mentioned that it's mandatory lectures. And then in the exam, he was like, surprise, everyone who came to all the lectures gets 2 bonus points now. So this could really help you to, be between failing and passing in this one. But in the end, if you have online lectures and he doesn't take attendance, then it doesn't matter. So yeah, small exam, but still a little bit tricky because, it's kind of a topic most people aren't really interested in, and you have this stupid 200-page book you have to go through. But really, if you focus on the things they mentioned during the lectures, then you should be fine. And I think there was also some summary of this book. I think we uploaded in Dentalk Study Hub. I'm not sure though. I will check on that. And that's basically about public health. Shouldn't worry about this. You'll have it done in the end of the course, and it's no problem in exam period. Any questions? All right. So oral histology and embryology then.
So oral histology and embryology is important for your preventive exam as well, because it has a lot of information, of course, about the development and developmental defects. So just in general, this subject is quite important and interesting for us. So you have 1 lecture every week, and you will have a robot test, and we do recommend that you do the robot test based on your knowledge and really think about your answers, and not just look for quick answers on Google or whatever, because they do he can tell when it's plagiarized, and they do appreciate your own answers. But anyway, if you just study that every week, it should be fine. The exam itself is not that complicated, so you'll either have an oral exam with one question from oral histology and one from oral embryology, or you'll have a written test which will have 10 multiple choice questions and 3 to 4 open-ended questions. But for these answers, they should be quite detailed, because I've heard from the previous year that he was looking for a lot of detail. So if you know it, just write it. Just write down everything you know. Again, the lectures and practicals, the presentations are quite good. They're very packed with detail, so they should be fine. And if you still have histology, if you still have the histology exam left, then you might be able to do it right before this exam. But that's pretty much it for oral histo and embryo. And the book 10 Kate's Oral Histology, that is a really good book for answering the robots and just in general learning about it if you are interested.
Yeah, thanks. I would like to add about the open-ended questions, because last year I did the oral histology test during the pandemic and we had the written test. Multiple choice is pretty straightforward. You get 1 point per question, and that really write down everything you can, because you don't only get like either a point or not a point on the one question, but you get points on the different details. Like I don't know, you write like half a page for one question, and everything that is correct he will give you a mark, and in the end you have a certain amount of points. And so just write everything down you can, and maybe even it can go into anatomy. Same goes for oral histology. If you have same goes for the oral exam. If you might have the oral exam with Professor Check, he really wants to know everything there is to know about the question you picked, and even if it goes into oral anatomy a little bit and stuff like this. But yeah, everything from lectures is basically what you need like to pass. If you write down in the written test everything that was on the lecture slide to this topic, you'll get an A. It's not too big of a deal.
So you guys don't have Professor Check this semester. I think it's Professor Jan, and he'll be examining you as well. So he is also really detail oriented. He loves details, and some of the robot questions are slightly philosophical. So as long as you have interesting answers, it's fine. Yasanas?
I just want to ask you, for this weekly report, we can do it any times, and also can we do it like multiple times, or is just once?
So you can you have to submit it before, I think for us it was by Sunday night, but just check with your professor when he wants you to submit it. There's a deadline for it. So in that week, you need to fill it out related to whichever topic you're doing. And then you can revisit the robot, and those are important for your exam, I would say, in some ways, because they do ask questions that they think are important. But you can open it again. Yeah.
Yeah, but don't worry too much about the robot. It's good way to keep track of all the like stuff that get taught to you each week. But it's not like I think you can't really fail the robot. Like it's all open answered questions. So I think he just wants you to really show initiative and write down everything you basically learned during this week. And I think I even sometimes left out one if I really couldn't find the answer for this or something. So don't worry too much about the robots. But also, if you don't do them at all, I'm pretty sure he will be pissed and maybe an email or maybe ask you in the exam why you didn't do any of the robots. So try to do them and try to do them properly, but don't worry about them too much. Okay, so if there aren't any more questions, we'll continue.
So your microbiome classes this semester are lectures and practical lessons. we highly recommend that you are prepared for your practical lessons and definitely follow what's happening each week, because this part of the basically this semester you're focusing on the principles of the practicals that you will be carrying out next semester. So it's really important to understand those now rather than wait for it next semester, because then it just gets a lot and it's hard to manage. And so if you understand the principles now, even if you don't particularly understand why for which specific bacteria that's happening, as long as you understand the principle of the tests, it's good, because it will help you a lot next semester. And again, in the next semester, when you're having this exam, the practical part of the exam is very huge. And so by very huge, I mean it's very important, and you would need a lot of, they just care more about the principles, whether you understand it and how you can use those to deduce, for example, what kind of bacteria it is. So again, just focus a bit on the practicals. There's no harm in doing that. So this semester you'll be having a credit test. It'll be multiple choice questions. It's really easy, I think, if I remember correctly, but the credit tests for microbio are never too complicated. The pass mark is 7 out of 10, and again, lectures, protocols are more than enough.
Yeah, the credit test, you really don't worry about it. If I remember, like maybe we even had a few questions in there, like they asked what ELISA is, a type of screening test, and one of the possible answers was a British girl or something like this. So not all questions are like this. Don't get me wrong. You still should know a few stuff from the practical lessons. You still should study a little bit, but really don't panic about the credit test. They really don't want you to fail. If you fail, they give you even the option to write it again at the same day, like right afterwards, and give you another test. And sometimes they even, like, if you only are 1 point away from passing, they call you to the front for like a consultation and make sure that ask you for a few questions and then give you this extra point. So like the credit test is really not a big deal, but still we try to prepare for the practical lessons a little bit. First of all, so you just don't sit in the practical lessons and have no idea what's going on, which is, I guess, kind of annoying. But also because it's really helpful not to be overwhelmed by the exam, because when you start studying for the final exam and you have no idea what you have done so far in all the practical lessons, you're gonna have a really hard time. It's gonna be hard to catch up with this. So just to prepare a little bit, yeah, it's a good idea. Yeah, so any questions from microbiology?
So your protocols are quite important, because again, next semester you'll be referring to them a lot for your exam preparation. So make sure your protocols are nice and that you understand what you're doing.
And keep the protocols, because it hasn't happened to me or anyone I know, but theoretically they say bring it to the exam. And they can, like, for example, if you're doing really bad about your practical question in the exam, they could ask you, oh, let's see your protocol from this specific practical lesson. Like, let's see if you understood it back then and how you filled it out. So fill them out nicely and bring them, like, keep them in a safe place till the exam and bring them to the exam. Okay, if there aren't any questions, we're gonna continue. Like, that was basically it with the subjects. If you like think of any questions later, you, of course, like, you can ask away and always send us an email or something like this. Or even now, still while I'm talking during the presentation, just write in the chat or raise your hand or something like this, and we can answer your question. Okay, so just one thing I want to remind you of is the survival guide we made. Some of you might have already had a look in it. It's there's one for the preclinical years and also one for the clinical years, if you already want to have a look at microbiology, for example. We regularly, every year, we try to update it, so it's always up to date to the newest regulations, to newest type of courses. You'll find it in the DANSOC Study Hub, and it really gives you, along with it can give you a really good overview over what you need to know and what to expect from all the different exams. And then I just want to give you some personal recommendations about this semester, because it's a really hard one. I remember I really did hard on this semester because I had a hard time because I still had anatomy and histology to pass. So in the end, I had like 9 different exams over the whole summer, and it really crushed me. Like, it was the hardest summer of my life study-wise. So, but I was a bit stupid. I did bad scheduling. I started way too late. If you don't do this, there have been other people in my class who have been doing really well, even with histology and anatomy. They've managed to pass everything. And it's definitely possible if you just schedule everything right. So you have a lot on your plate this semester. Of course, if you can't do biochemistry, if you still have like too much stress with other exams, leave it behind. Do it in winter. But if you can, do it before physiology. Also, I recommend you to do a preterm for any exam, like try to preterm one of the big exams. It will make the exam period so much easier because you have so much more time to study for everything else. If you can, for example, do biochemistry or physiology as a preterm, you have it done in the beginning of exam period, it would be so awesome. you really have then weeks to study for all the other subjects. Yeah, basically try to pass everything, like I said, but focus on preventive dentistry and physiology. Don't leave everything for the end of the summer. I've done that. It wasn't a good idea. I had, in the end of the summer, I had anatomy, I think physiology and histology all within 2 weeks. And it was just, it's a bad idea. Try to, even if you're not 100% prepared, and I don't know how the exam period will be this summer, if it will be doing the whole summer again, or if it will be split in 2. If it's doing the whole summer, that's good. You can space the exams out nicely. If it's split in 2, and really try to give each exam at least a try before the summer break. Even if you're not 100% prepared, you might pass anyways. But if you leave like 3 exams for those last 2 weeks before the new semester starts, it's just likely to not gonna end too well. And yeah, like always, we recommend try to attend and pay attention in all classes and lectures and stuff. But I mean, I know how it is. Like, it's not always easy to go to all the lectures or attend all the lectures and really pay attention. So if I can recommend you, just like the important lectures you should really pay attention in is preventive dentistry and microbiology practices. Preventive dentistry, like I told you, just because Kuklatová really wants a specific information, and microbiology practices, because it will be so much easier next semester in your microbiology final if you just prepare like half an hour for each practical class. It will do like work magic for your studying progress next semester. And also biochemistry seminars is always a good idea to be prepared for, especially if you have Professor Taborska. She can be quite harsh in the seminars and bully you if you're not prepared. And yeah, it will help you also with the credit test and the progress tests and everything. And most importantly, just don't stress yourself. Like, you'll manage. Start early to study. Like this summer, more importantly than any other time, really start a few weeks before exam period already. Don't start in exam period. It's important. And schedule everything right, and you'll be fine. You won't have a problem. And that was it for academic night. Thank you for your attention, and here are all the contact information for DANSOC. And also remember that you have buddies. If you signed up for the buddy system, I'm sure they'll be happy to help you with anything you have troubles with. And yeah, for now, I want to ask you if you have any more questions about anything we talked about today or anything else, really.
Okay, so just in addition to this discussion, last year when the third years they presented this second year semester guideline, it's fourth semester guidelines for us, I had a panic attack when I left, and I just did not know what to do with that much information because I had a lot of exams left. I had same as Moritz, I had anatomy and histology left. So honestly, don't let the big number bog you down right now. just focus on working weekly. Just don't be too harsh with yourself, but just have a general plan about what you want to do each week. You want to stay on top of oral histo, preventive. And again, just a reminder that preventive really does encompass anything and everything. So make sure you just cover all your bases. But it's hard to not stress, but just don't stress too much. Try to take care of your mental health in this time, because it's not an easy semester, but you can do it if you just do something each week. You're progressing in some way or the other, so that's good.
And to give you some motivation, of course, you will still have hard exams after this, but after this semester, it will get easier, kind of, or at least in my experience, and that's what I heard so far. This is really one of your hardest semesters. And after that, you can look forward to more clinical subjects, more practical subjects, really actually do dentistry work. So it's going to be fun. Just this semester, you have to work a little bit harder than usual, maybe, and you're going to be fine. Like, don't worry about it. All right. If there aren't any more questions, then thank you very much. And have a nice rest of the Sunday and enjoy your next week.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a nice day. Bye.